Welcome back, everyone in YouTube land. This is your tinfoil hat economist coming back to you at the speed of light with episode number 25, America's 50-Year War on Labor. Let's get right to it. What has happened to labor in the United States since 1970? Well, according to figures provided by Fred, that's the St. Louis branch of the Federal Reserve Board, we see about labor had about a 65% share of income in the late 1960s, and that decreased to 60% in the present day. According to a study from McKinsey, and I'll leave links to these descriptions in the description box, labor had about a 65% share of national income in 1968, maybe, and that's declined to 57% in the present day. Well, what caused this declining share of labor income? Well, there was a number of things that happened. Of course, some of this was a result of demographics. There was a large baby boom which entered the labor pool, and an increase in women joining the labor force. So you had a large supply of labor. Often not mentioned is the role of trade. Obviously, once the world became globalized and multinationals were able to source in nation of lowest cost, that's environment in terms of environmental regulations and labor costs, other regulatory costs, rents, there was a lot of offshoring from the U.S. economy. This is often obscured in what I call the temple of orthodox macroeconomic theology. The last thing macroeconomists want to hear is that trade, international trade, or liberalized trade actually decreases labor share of income. But we have a study, again, from Fred, regarding what happened to India when they opened up their markets. And interesting study, globalization affects India too. And there's a nice chart here showing a declining share of labor compensation in GDP in India as they reformed their economy to allow more imports. So there's other studies that show that free trade also leads to greater income stratification. So the role of trade in depressing wages in the U.S., I think, has been underestimated and is worth much more study. There's a second factor that played into declining wages in the U.S., and that is, of course, immigration. According to a recent study from MIT, and there will be a link in the description box, there are 20 million illegal aliens or illegal residents in the United States today, and the U.S. labor force is about 165 million, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Rounded off, about 1 out of every 8 people in the U.S. today looking for a job or who wants a job is an illegal immigrant. And illegal immigrants are very admirable people. They come through difficult circumstance to live in the United States, and they desperately want work. If that doesn't depress wages, well, then I don't know what does. We have a third problem. If this wasn't enough, there's a third problem in that the kind of taxes that have gone up since the 1960s have been payroll taxes. You hear an awful lot about income taxes. You hear an awful lot about corporate income taxes. But you don't hear much about labor taxes or payroll taxes. They were 3% up to a top of $4,800 in 1960. Now they're the maximum Social Security FICA, that's sometimes called Medicare tax rate, is 7.2%, and it goes over a little $100,000. So there's been a radical increase in payroll taxes since the late 1960s, even while labor share of income fell and real wages are stagnant. In fact, again, I'll present a link for you Adjusted for inflation, average hourly wages in 1972 were $23.24. And in March of 2020, they were $23.24. So we've had nearly a half century of wage stagnation in America, and I would say actually wage decreases after taxes because of rising payroll taxes. So what's the solution to this? I'm not a Trump supporter, but U.S. trade policy should probably focus on job creation in the U.S. and tight labor markets in the U.S. if we want to preserve a roughly free market system inside the U.S. Reasonable controls on immigration are also advised. An interesting blogger named Scott Sumner recently posited that a tight monetary policy pursued long enough will lead to socialism. Why is that? Because the tight monetary policy suffocates economic growth. Voters become disenchanted, they become unemployed and then disenchanted, and then they choose socialism. I would argue the same thing happens. If a first world nation doesn't protect and preserve its labor force, the biggest voting bloc out there, there's 165 million Americans in the labor force. That's a huge voting bloc. If those people become dissatisfied with what is presented as a free market system, they are entitled, and they should, vote for socialism. If you want free markets to prevail, you've got to offer a better deal to the employee class. So, that's episode number 25, and this is your tinfoil hat economist signing off at the speed of light, and I look forward to seeing all of you again in episode number 26.